Thank you for tuning in. Welcome to our panel for MCSD and Happening Studio. We are Masato and Karen, and we're zooming from Tokyo.
The talk is divided into two parts. Part 1 is pre-recorded, and this is part 1.
Part 2, we will go live on Zoom and share our work in progress of the latest MCSD's identity. Along with the sneak preview, we can also take questions and hopefully have more conversations organically. Please keep in mind that it is about 8 a.m. in Tokyo, so forgive us if you are not so quick on our feet. So diving right in, we call ourselves Happening Studio. My name is Masato.
I'm Karen. Hi.
Here are some quick facts. It's a husband-wife's design studio. Obviously, Karen is the big boss. We wear many hats outside of graphic design roles. We are our own HR department, payroll office, customer relationship, and sometimes we wear janitorial hats. We are based in Los Angeles, and since 2019 we have temporarily relocated to Tokyo. We work for clients of commercial as well as cultural sectors, and we like this contrast in the balance of the two worlds.
Today, we have 3 topics to talk about. It is about staying flexible, being resourceful, and appreciate ambiguity. These 3 concepts have been brewing in our practice unknowingly for a while, and the last 2 years have really helped us articulate and recognize our way of problem solving.
So these key concepts have played a pretty big role in the process of making of MCSD's identity. Diving right into flexibility, Karen is from Hong Kong and I was born in Toyota City, Japan. And throughout our lives, we both moved around quite a bit as is mentioned on this slide. Therefore, we appreciate cultural and behavioral shifts of a society each time we move to a new space. The more we see, the more we realize there are multiple ways of doing the same thing. There's a certain mindfulness and adaptations we keep in mind to guide us when we try to solve a problem. So what are these 4 photos have in common? These are various studio spaces in the early year of 2019 when we moved to Tokyo from Los Angeles. We wanted to practice mobility in our design studio. Out of necessity, we would often use convenience stores' eating spaces as our workspace. It worked out pretty well. Wi-Fi was pretty decent. Pretty good printer was available, and the pantry was full of snacks, obviously. And Lawson would be our favorite convenience stores to go to. So people often have this romanticized image of what a physical space should look like, but having gone through this experience, we realize that for us, a legitimacy of a studio space really comes from within.
Japan is particularly problematic for us since this country has so many great used bookstores, and like many designers, we like to collect things. If you look at the photo on the right hard enough, there's always treasure hidden. In this case, it's an original Tadanori Yoko poster hidden behind a wall of unwanted comic books. Obviously, a couple months in, hours, actually mostly me, my hoarding habit has become an issue. On the surface, Common Standard is a regular art bookstore stocking up to 15 weird design book and prints. The rule is that if I don't sell an item, I don't get to buy more item. It is our way to circulate item that we have found in order to make space for what we will find.
Flexibility is the main concept of MCSD's new identity. We see it like a slider, left to right. Some museum projects will be content driven, as in it is about the artwork, it is about editorial. So in that case, the content will take a front seat and the identity of the museum itself would take a back seat, and quietly lets us know that there is MCSD's institutional voice. When the identity shifts to more of a brand-driven projects, perhaps the logo can be more prominent, museum brand presence is louder. You can see this work in the forms of banners and business cards and merchandising. To break down this diagram a bit more, this range, the shift, it also has 3 channels, right? So we have MCSD will communicate outwards, out to the public, in the context of a website to outreach programs and banners and so on. They will communicate inwards amongst their peers, in-house communications, and then the 3rd channel would be on-site. The museum will have to communicate to site visitors. In this case, the identity needs to work in the context of a physical exhibition design and experience, brochures and visitor stickers. Sub-brands like museums, stores, and restaurants will also need to use this identity in a way they are part of the museum's ecosystem.
Moving on to resourcefulness. We think being resourceful is about keeping your ideas simple. Complex ideas are made out of series of simple ideas. In reverse, if you break down complexity into bits and pieces, they're less complex and easier to tackle.
The inspo for this concept comes from woodworking. If you can perfect the super basic cuts, like let's say angle cuts or dado cuts, then you can build a pretty stable shelter. And I think that's a very amazing, empowering metaphor to keep in mind. You can make unexpected, complex design and still keep the construction pretty basic. The example is the web poster we made for Woodbury School of Architecture Fall 2021 lecture series. Although it may seem complex with the dimension and the spinning animation, it is made up of basic HTML and CSS markup. First, we make a very basic layout on a panel. What's amazing about web coding community is a sense of open source and share of knowledge in coding. So we worked on top of someone else's build for this cube animation. This build is also only made up of only small, simple HTML and CSS. No advanced scripts are involved. So the basic layouts are applied to these panels of the cube. Then instead of a cube, what if the panels were repositioned to be more stacked up? As a result, they turn into a series of posters like this. So like how I worked on top of someone else's building, I hope somebody will take this build and reinterpret it in a way that is unexpected and unique.
This is a series of limited edition wrapping paper we did for the Whitney Museum. Instead of printing, we wanted the material to do all the work and have the Whitney identity to be part of the folds. Each piece of paper is perforated differently. When folded, the edges cast a shadow that will make different shapes of the W's. And this is another example about how we try to be resourceful. The Bronx Documentary Center shared important COVID information around the neighborhood by posting physical flyers around the street and on their digital platform. During the early days of COVID spreading throughout New York, they faced various challenges from no printer was open, the message was not branded, and there's a shortage of staff. Making traditional identity wouldn't be beneficial for their need. As an alternative, we designed packaging tapes which host all the important brand information for them to use. No matter what the content or printing method it is, this tape becomes a consistent bridge, both physically and digitally. Similar to many small to medium-sized museums, MCASD has to be smart about how they utilize their lean resource and manpower. In parallel to the woodworking joints in the earlier slide, the MCASD new identity consists of various joinery that can be combined in multiple ways for various needs. In the short term, numerous templates and tutorial will be provided as a kick-off point for the team to learn the system. For the long run, we reflect the MCASD identity annually to health check the brand and evolve as needed.
We are now entering the last section, ambiguity. And really to talk about ambiguity, we have to talk about our inspo designer, Sugiura Kohei. We came across his work during the residency in Japan, and he has a very intriguing career path. Not very known outside of Asia, but I think he's somebody that deserves more attention in the West. So in the 60s, he first started out his practice design in a pretty high spirit of modernism, very grid-based, and had a very rational approach to his posters and books. He even taught at a school in Germany called Ulm Design School, which was heavily rooted in Bauhaus design pedagogy. And it was around this time that he experienced this revelation. And the big realization was that His very first attraction to the rigidity of the Bauhaus designs no longer aligned with him. The rigid, rule-based approach to design was too restricting for him. So he became more interested in an in-betweenness, the ambiguity, because the complexity of life itself it cannot be answered in just yes or no. Whenever students had questions for him, he would answer, perhaps. So sooner or later, he was called Mr. Perhaps. And it's quite a contrast to see the work he made after the shift from his Bauhaus design approach. So here you can see before and after Mr. Perhaps. In fact, till this day, graphic design in general is still very much under the spell of Bauhaus, and the danger of this is the oversimplifying of complex ideas. How can we communicate complex ideas, subjectivity, and emotion with typeface, just one typeface, that is, a cold, rigid grid system that is clinical and mostly stylized now. So what does he mean by in-betweenness? I think we're confronted with the balance of in-betweenness versus clarity whenever we structure sentences on a daily basis. Many languages of the West, we tend to construct a sentence by clarifying the subject, the noun, right? So for this case, the sentence is, let's wear a mask. So you need to place that article in front of the subject to define what it is. It's like we do this without thinking now. It's like breathing. But it actually requires a lot of rational thinking internally before you even say the sentence. So really you have to ask yourself, is this mask require a or the? Is it plural, singular? It's quite tricky when you're learning English for the first time, and I think I still have trouble sometimes. So already when we're trying to make up a sentence, we try to be very clear and logical. I say binary even more in other languages like German, French, because grammar is gender-based. So its articles are even subdivided into feminine, masculine, neutral articles. So already there's a lot of decisions need to be made in a sentence. And I always wonder why a dog has a masculine article and a cat has a feminine article. As of languages East, in general, there's no article, so let's wear mask. That's the abstraction. There's no a or the. That's the in-betweenness that we're talking about. Is it a mask for me or for you? It doesn't really matter. The clarity here, the nuance is that we're talking about this general mask on a universal level. And another example would be these I-centric phrases. A sign of modernity is when you can celebrate individuality and self-expression, like I am sad, I am happy, I am hungry. So this is this A to B relationship that I'm telling you that I am hungry to you. So that's the Western way to communicate. The direct translation of I am hungry in Japanese would be stomach is getting empty. Now, it's not my stomach or your stomach, but it's hinting out the collective feeling of what it means to be hungry. Because everybody has experienced hunger and remembers the feeling of it, registered in their memory. So there is this sense of togetherness and sympathy we can create from this approach to language. And this takes us back to MCASD and the term belonging. When Chris Cloud and us sat down for the first time, he threw this word and we connected right away. That a contemporary museum is no longer just a place to display art, but need to cultivate collectiveness and togetherness. There's a sense of belonging for everyone, digitally and physically.
Our first step to the new design for MCASD was to understand the community, the audience for the museum, and see what the current relationship between the people and the museum is like. There's a few market research and visitor surveys in the past, but we want to have more of an in-depth conversation with the San Diego communities. So this is our game plan on how to conduct a survey. Ask and observe. We love Terry Gross. I'm sure you know it too. So we want to be more like Terry Gross on Fresh Air. Let's not bombard our volunteer with endless, exhausting multiple choice questions, as we are not looking for data or trends, but ask questions that would welcome them to write and confess how they really felt about the museum. So we start by dividing our audience into 5 categories.
Only 10 questions were given, and each community had its own tailored set of questions. Here are some of the sample questions. We asked for keywords on how they felt when they walked into the museum, asked about non-art related questions, and our favorite would be like, does a Lyft driver know where to take you when you ask for MCSD as a destination and why? This is a survey performance result. Over 350 responses and 47% completion rate. Honorable mention goes out to the artist community. They spent on average 55 minutes to fill out their survey questions with a 66% completion rate. So they wrote us an essay, and thank you. We read every single one of them.
Throughout collecting and reading the response, we understand what's important to them by how much they wrote, what were their word choices they used, and what's the overall theme across various members of the communities. Many of the insights echoes the concept of belonging through the acts of diversity, accessibility, and connectivity. So here's our realization after the survey part. There's a disconnection from what MCASD does and what the San Diego community think MCASD do. While the museum recognized and took actions to work on those key issues, the lack of public communication meant no one really heard about all the good things they really did.
We did an audit for the current identity system to see how the messaging is applied. Just from looking at the audit, there are 5 key challenges we face with the current identity. The big questions we had is the icon, the logo of the X. It seems to be overpowering, overused without much of a meaningful or clear concept that MCSD can stand behind. That this X can be applied to another cultural institution and it still works. Thus, we need an identity that is more bespoke, more customized, only to MCSD.
So when we show a new identity, please keep in mind that these are the set of adjectives, the characteristic to align with. The new identity should be simple, timeless, and impactful.
And so this concludes our part 1 presentation. But before we forget, we want to give a big thank you to MCSD team for their support and trust they have given us, allowing us to reshape their identity with open conversations and transparent decision making. So we yield the floor. We're passing the mic back to you, Chris.